Thailand is located in Southeast Asia, home to over 69 million people. The country's axial position influences major aspects of Thailand's society, economy, and culture. Its geographical landscape is ideally suited to wet rice cultivation. Beginning from the 17th and 18th century, rice consumption as a cheap dietary sample grew as a supplement to wheat and flour products, as a starch for sizing textiles, and as a feed for livestock in European countries. Towards the 19th century, Southeast Asia became an increasingly important rice exporter for Western countries. Demand for rice for Southeast Asia grew dramatically, creating principal economic changes for the regions, as countries such as Thailand, Vietnam, and Burma responded by specializing in rice exports and concentrating on its agricultural industry as a main driver for economic growth and development. In Thailand particularly, the fertile floodplains and tropical monsoon climate initially benefited rice production before climate began changing. Now as one of the top 3 rice exporters in the world, Thailand has a global market share of 25%. But farmers in Thailand were familiar with rice production even before exports became significant, as rice is a staple food for locals. This is especially observed in small farms in Thailand, such as in Nakhon Sri Thammarat. However, these small farms typically lack the resources, knowledge, and information to compete in increasingly integrated markets. They have poor infrastructure, insufficient market knowledge, and insufficient links to buyers in bigger market chains. These disadvantages greatly contribute to low levels of income and poverty among small local farmers.
Over the last century, the ways in which the West has developed and spoken about development have shifted considerably. At first, development was driven by economic prosperity. The West's obsession with progress dominated development discourse until environmental concerns became prominent in the public eye. Now, the UN has placed humanitarian concerns at the forefront of development, with poverty alleviation the number 1 global concern. This global push to adopt neoliberalism has led to a shift in development frameworks over the last decades. This shift in development promoted the idea that economic development could replace all other kinds of development as an all-encompassing model. The belief that the markets will solve anything was prominent at the time. Neoliberalism and the deregulation and weakening of the government and its services can be argued to have exacerbated poverty and social inequality. Neoliberalism and its development push for entrepreneurship have overlooked the hegemonic and exclusionary nature of capitalism. Our further look into microcredit can illuminate power structures amongst state institutions, communities, and individuals within the neoliberal framework.
While Thailand has experienced improvements in poverty inequality indicators over the last 4 decades, the last several years of income and consumption, particularly in the remote and rural areas, have stalled nationwide. According to 2014 statistics by the World Bank, over 80% of the country's 7.1 million poor live in these rural areas, such as the village outside Nakhon Sri Thammarat. As the productivity of the agricultural sector forms a primary source of subsistence and labour in these areas, it remains an essential component in the alleviation of poverty. The impoverished conditions often felt by poor communities in rural Thailand and elsewhere are multifaceted and complex in their scope and impact. In considering the causes of poverty, this draws on conceptualising the basic freedoms people should have the right to, and their restraint from such freedoms as a barrier to development. Many of these villages therefore face a lack of freedom as restricted opportunity to access capital, skills and education which hinder their development prospects. In considering the need to maintain or repair the machinery essential to the production of rice, the inability to harness such skills is a considerable challenge that must be addressed.
In response to some of the difficulties in measuring the complexities of poverty, the introduction of the Multidimensional Poverty Index, or MPI, has been formulated to understand how people experience poverty in multiple and simultaneous ways. It identifies how people are being left behind across 3 key dimensions: health, education, and standard of living. Unlike the MPI, indexes of economic growth are a much more narrow measurement of poverty. However, its statistics are useful in considering the nation's prospects for export commodities, which is particularly relevant in understanding the salience of the agricultural sector. In the Thailand Economic Monitor report, conducted by the World Bank in 2019, it is estimated that Thailand's economic growth will continue to rely mainly on domestic consumption, as exports will be adversely affected by reduced global demand. In consideration of this trend, it is therefore important to consider a development strategy that not only includes the strengthening of agricultural productivity, but also ensures alternative development efforts and initiatives are made as a robust response to overcome these issues for sustainable development in these areas.
In particular, it is commonplace for inequality among women in rural farming villages to occur. Women perform the bulk of labour in agrarian societies and contribute more greatly to the overall well-being of the household than men. Furthermore, social factors are influenced by economic forces, as their partners often leave the communities in search of work in urban areas and potentially never return. Not only is a heavier burden placed on women to effectively raise their families alone, but the prevalence of mental health and depression has been found as an increasing factor among Thai rice farmers as a result of such issues. Another issue resulting from the inequalities faced by these villages is a lack of access to skills through educational platforms or forums. Children are therefore adversely impacted by a lack of development, as they are unable to obtain education and the skills needed to progress into adulthood. A serious burden on sustainable development for these villages is the reliance on a primary resource determined by seasonal or environmental factors. Most rice fields in the eastern part of Thailand produce only 1 crop per year, whereas crops located in the central plains permit the production of 2 or even 3 crops per year. Studies have been conducted on the impact of climate change on rice production, which concluded that such extreme weathers greatly affect rice crop yield. The ability for Thai workers to obtain a sustainable income year-round is therefore affected, and is related to the requirement of men to leave the community to seek unskilled labour in the off-season. The volatility in this resource as a primary factor for development must therefore be supplemented with skills to strengthen this area of labour and development, and additionally seek other methods of development to address the needs of the community that cannot be met through these means.
As such, the issues faced by the villagers can be considered in both actual and potential terms, meaning the current impoverished conditions they are facing as an immediate barrier to development, and after development initiatives have been implemented. As this is a long-term approach to development that aims to be sustainable within the community, it must be ensured that any transitional or potential impacts can be mitigated to ensure the preservation of the people's traditional customs and culture. Known as imminent development impacts, the development approach must be mindful of and take all steps necessary to reduce any adverse effects that are built in or structurally embedded in communities undergoing development transition. This is perhaps particular to Thai women taking on entrepreneurship through social enterprise, where subordinating gender ideologies are embedded. These women may face abuse and scrutiny when striving for or acting on these economic freedoms and individual outcomes.
The emerging popularity of microfinance represented a contentious shift in development practice, transferring the financial responsibility which was once placed on the state to individuals to draw themselves out of poverty. Microcredit has become a mainstream solution to poverty alleviation, characterized by a neoliberal self-help approach. Microfinance models for development have tended to target women as potential entrepreneurs.
In early 2000s, microcredit programs targeting rural women was the dominant feature of donor strategies for poverty alleviation. Women have been targeted because of their core roles in agrarian societies. They perform most of the labour and are believed to have a higher propensity to pay back loans. The engendering nature of the development shift has progressive potential to change women's lives for the better.
Microcredit was established in the 1970s to push big banks to contribute to the economic development of the world's most disadvantaged rural population through credit to small farmers. Poor women are able to obtain small loans at lower interest rates, meant as both an alternative to both formal and informal finance systems, which tend to exclude and prey on poor, respectively.
Social entrepreneurship aims to maximise and sustain social impact. SE can transcend the creed of profit maximisation by offering a more ethical model for doing business.
Entrepreneurship and microfinance models have a number of emancipatory potentials for rural people. They have the potential to give greater credibility to families to obtain loans. They have the potential to economically and socially liberate women. They can provide economic assurance for families if the male head of house abandons the family for the city. They have emancipatory potential to liberate and empower women, and the possibility to challenge and break down embedded ideological and cultural structures. They also have the possibility to enhance financial sustainability for agrarian communities, and they can provide women with individual economic power and freedom.